Okay. All right. Hello, everyone. Welcome back. I think there's some new people here. I don't think you were here last time, and Akash finally showed up. Or was he? Oh, well, everyone's wearing masks, so I'm sorry. Tonight I'm going to be talking about environmental economics, and then we're going to have a, well, let me just go over the agenda. Let me move this out. So tonight I'm going to be going over some club announcements and upcoming events. We're going to talk about the stock market game for a little bit. I'm going to give my presentation on environmental economics. We're going to have our trivia game and its associated prize. And then some of you are now eligible active members. So I've got some t-shirts for you all here today, if you're eligible. So yeah, any questions before I get started? Cool. So upcoming events and announcements. So at the last meeting, I talked about maybe we were going to Chicago this semester. We've decided to postpone that to the spring. The Federal Reserve Money Museum isn't open right now because of COVID. And so we can't go there. And then we also were looking to go to the trading floor at SIBO. They're closed too. So I'm pushing it off to the spring and I'm hoping that they'll be open. Fingers crossed, we'll see. The next meeting will be on November 1st from 7 to 8. I think that's a Monday. Frida will be giving a presentation about retirement planning and retirement accounts and all that fun stuff. So I said we weren't going to Chicago in exchange. We're going to the 2021 Business and Economic Outlook Conference on November 5th. I don't know if you guys know Professor Sindo. He's one of our finance professors. He's giving a presentation that day, and so he invited us to tag along. Some of you have already registered. If you haven't, I'm trying to get everyone registered by this Friday because it's a ticketed event, and so we want to make sure that you guys have a seat if you're interested in attending. So if you haven't registered already, I've sent out emails about it, but you can also talk to me after the meeting and I will. Hey guys, welcome. Yes.
Is November 5th like a Friday or a weekend?
November 5th is a Friday.
Friday?
Yeah. It's from 8 a.m. to 12 p.m. So the time is not great. It's also in Valpo, so that's also not great, but I'll be there. Frida's going, Matthew's going, some Jake is going. Depending on how many people sign up, we might like carpool or something. I'm trying not to spend club money to do it. I would just like, we can meet at the school and I'll drive us over or something like that. But if there's a lot of people that want to go, then we're gonna have to do something. So that's why I want it by Friday so that I've got time. We can get tickets and we can figure out transportation. So yes, tentative guest speaker date is November 15th. We're looking at getting, what's his name? Howard Cohen. He's a former chancellor of PNW. Well, it was Purdue Calumet then. That's tentative though, so that's still up in the air. Our final general meeting of the fall semester will be November 17th. That is a Wednesday. We don't have a topic or a presenter for that day yet, so if one of you want to volunteer, let me know. If not, I'll be talking about something. I don't know. On December 2nd, tentatively, myself, some of you guys are in Econ 322, which is Economics of Public Policy. We're working on a service funding project this semester. And hopefully by the 2nd, we will have presentations ready. And so we're going to invite the Econ Club to listen in on those presentations. I think Frida's group is giving a presentation on environmental stuff in the region. My group will be giving a presentation on Gary, Indiana. Then our other group is working with the real estate commission in the area. So it'll be interesting stuff. Like I said, that date's not set in stone yet, so it's subject to change. And then on December 10th, we want to have a movie night, and we want to do the stock market game awards. The stock market game ends on the 7th. Registration for the game is now closed, so don't accidentally leave because I won't be able to let you back in. But yeah, that's in full swing. So that'll end on the 7th, and then we'll have we want to do awards for that on the 10th along with our movie night. We don't have a movie yet, so if you have suggestions, we would like to be vaguely economics related. The last movie we watched was Wolf of Wall Street. So tangentially attached to economics. Yes.
Okay, so for the stock market game, do you have to sell it for it to count, or is it just like whatever you're gonna?
It's whatever your net worth is at the very end.
Okay.
Yeah, you don't have to sell. Yeah. Speaking of which, we're going to talk about that now. So this is the leaderboard as of right now. These are the top 3. So what do you guys think so far?
I hate the stock market.
You hate the stock market?
He was first place after his first day. I get 4% of that.
Yes.
What happened?
I'm just been making a bunch of like risky plays, seeing things out, but yesterday was like particularly rough because like the server went down,
Yeah.
and I made a very risky play during that time. It went down a lot, but I did a bunch of recovery today because I made a couple day trades, but now I just have to do. Now I'm pretty much like even again. So.
Besides the server going down yesterday, what do you guys think of the platform itself?
I like it.
It's pretty user-friendly. It's pretty slow, so I use my other like stock stuff to actually like pretty much check up like real time.
Yeah, you have to keep on refreshing.
Yeah, and then I'll do the actual trade on here, of course.
How many of you participated in the stock market game last semester? Okay, so better than last semester, the platform? Yeah, okay. All right. Yeah, this was an experiment this year because last year we used Investopedia. It was free, but it didn't have an app, and I wanted an app. So, does anyone else want to talk about their trading experience?
I went to class for half an hour and lost 5K.
Yeah.
Literally 5K in half an hour.
Yep.
But I recovered.
I was like, what does leaderboard do? Crypto. Okay, I bought Dogecoin on this, and then it just kept dipping. Now I'm on 22nd place.
The first day the game started, crypto goes from 44,000 to 55,000 at Bitcoin. That first week was really good. Yeah.
So last semester when we started the game, it was right when all the meme stocks were happening. So like GameStop, AMC, all that stuff. This time when we started, the whole market went down because they raised interest rates. So
When that stops though, and when stock market goes up again, everyone's will cry.
really? Hopefully.
It's like,
What everybody who's on top right now is like heavily invested in crypto, and it's because like the crypto incentive flipped.
That sounds straight only. Yeah, what's his number one thing he invested Bitcoin.
And he doesn't sell it.
He's shorted Bitcoin too.
Yeah, well, if you
I wanted to buy one whole Bitcoin, but.
No,
That's why I wanted this.
Diversification.
Yeah.
I would do that,
He hasn't made any inflation.
exactly, he did like,
That's all he plays.
How many
He's trying
transactions?
stuff. He's fine.
Well,
Only
unless
11.
a lot of these top players paid a lot of attention to the like bearish incentive flipping to bullish because of like Merck pill release and a lot of other catalysts that changed like crypto incentive. A lot of them like pretty much got very fortunate, honestly. But
And I didn't know you had to pay commissions on every trade.
only on crypto,
Oh, only on crypto?
only on crypto.
Okay.
Yeah,
it's pretty small too.
crypto's, it's like 0.15% or something like that. Yeah, that's, what is it actually?
when you're at the bottom, every dollar
Yeah. Trying to battle.
matters.
Yeah.
Oh, I see.
The crypto commission is 0.15%. So
With cash interest. Yes.
cash interest is,
Well, except for then.
you get a, okay, so if you go, here, let me pull up mine.
They're not saying you earn that, are they?
No, yeah, so money that you keep as cash, you get 0.5% per
Oh,
day.
wow, okay. Wait.
No, not per day. It might be
If you
annual.
store this cash, you earn 0.5%,
Here, let me,
which is not that much, but still. $20.
history.
But
Yeah.
there you go.
So you get like about $1.50 in interest.
Probably not enough there, that's it.
That's my last resort.
Well, you, yeah.
So
So,
you're saying if I don't trade at all. and
well, you have to trade at least once in order to be eligible to win.
Fine, if I traded just once and we're collecting interest, I would be at least in the middle right now.
Yeah, but the first place guy's up by $13,000. So yeah. That's not gonna
The
work.
percentage is 0.5% a day.
It's probably not a day. It's probably per and on an annual
Every
basis.
day, yeah, okay. Yeah, that's every day.
I don't know. I can do the math for you later and figure it out. All right.
That's only like $500 a day.
No,
No?
0.5%. Yeah, then it's got to be per year. If it's yeah, you're right. It is $500 a day. It would be a 500 on $100. It would be $100,000 would be $500. Divided by 365 would be about $1.50.
Right.
So the interest rate is on an annual basis. There's your answer. All right. Anything else about the stock market?
Oh, is it like the first few places for the prize or?
Is the top 3 for sure? We're talking about maybe the top 5.
What's the first prize?
Ooh, let's see. We got about
With the big
100.
still?
Yeah, we're still gonna break it out, but we have $150 in prize money for this semester.
Very cool.
So you're looking at upwards of $60 for first
Okay.
place.
That's good.
Yeah, we wanna have a nice big incentive for you to try to win. So
Plus, we have.
yes,
So, since we are talking about like awards, yeah, how is that distributed? Is that just straight cash? Is it?
it would be an Amazon. We're not allowed to give out cash. It will be an Amazon gift card.
You should give it out in Bitcoin. Yeah. Zero, 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 zero.
Until it tanks the next day. All right. All right, I'm gonna keep on going. So yes, tonight I'm presenting on environmental econ. This is just a broad overview of environmental econ, and I'm gonna have to leave parts of it out because this is literally whole courses. I got some of this information from my big thick textbook. So If you have any questions, just raise your hand, let me know. There will be questions at the end too. And then, yeah, we'll just go from there. I have a discussion built into towards the end about the value of human life. I don't know how crazy you guys are gonna get if we have an argument. I just ask that you be courteous and respectful of other people's opinions. But hopefully we won't come to blows or anything like that. So what is environmental economics? It's the area of economics that examines the financial impact of environmental policies. So environmental economists perform studies to determine the theoretical or empirical effects of environmental policies on the economy, and then they try to solve those problems with various degrees of success. So there are some important terms of vocabulary, just so when you come across these kinds of things, you know kind of what's being talked about. The first term that's important to know is market failure. So market failure is a situation defined by inefficient distribution of goods and services in the free market. And so what happens is individual incentives for rational behavior do not lead to rational outcomes for the group. And on a graph, we can describe this as the quantity supplied not equaling the quantity demanded. And so what happens is all the economic actors work in their own self-interest. And what happens is by doing that, it leads to an outcome that is not socially optimal. So it might benefit the individual, but it hurts society as a whole. So this occurs in typical markets like markets for goods, but it also occurs in implicit markets. So we see market failure in things like elections and legislative processes as well. The common types of market failure that you'll run across are negative externalities, monopolies, inefficiency in production and allocation, incomplete information, and then public goods, which we'll talk about in a little bit. So to solve market failures, you can use private market solutions, government intervention through policies and mandates, or voluntary collective action. Now, part of the reason that market failure exists is because everyone's acting in their own best interest. And so typically you see market failure being solved through government action because corporations and individuals can't agree enough to solve the problem themselves. So one of the types of market failure is an externality, and that occurs when the production or consumption of a specific good or service impacts a third party that is not directly related to the production or consumption of that good or service. So an externality can be positive or negative. Positive externality occurs when there's a positive gain on both the private and public levels. So think of something like research and development. A company might do R&D, they might come up with some new technology, and that benefits them, but the research done benefits society as a whole. So that would be an example of a positive externality. A negative externality occurs when social cost outweighs the private cost. So classic example is pollution. Company saves cost by polluting the environment because it's usually cheaper to pollute, and they don't have to bear the cost, society bears the cost for that. Most externalities are negative. Here's a graph for people who like those sorts of things. This is a negative production externality. It's the price of steel versus the quantity of steel. And so these blue line S, that would be your private marginal cost, but then you have an externality which pushes the the social marginal cost above the private marginal cost. So you go from point A to point B because the cost goes up. And so then you slide back down to equilibrium on the demand curve and you end up at point C. So at the bottom, you go from Q1 to Q2. And so that would be overproduction when a company produces too much because they don't factor in the externality. And so in that triangle in the middle, we call that dead weight loss. So this would be a negative production externality. You can also have negative externalities on the demand on the consumer side. So this is a negative consumption externality. And it's the same type of, theory. You go from A to B because in this example, it's the price of cigarettes per pack versus the quantity of cigarettes per pack. So people smoke more, and that has an incurred cost. So then they go from B, and then they slide back to equilibrium in C. And so at the bottom, you can see that would be an overconsumption because people are consuming more than the equilibrium level of cigarettes in this case, because the cost of the externality is not factored in. So public good is a commodity or service available to all members of society. It's typically administered through governments and paid for by taxes. So a public good must be non-rivalrous and non-excludable. So non-rivalrous means that the goods do not dwindle in supply as more people consume them. And non-excludability means that the good is available to all citizens. So non-rivalrous, a good example of a commodity that's non-rivalrous is air. Me breathing air doesn't, maybe not a great example, especially today, but in classical thinking, me breathing air doesn't really affect your ability to breathe air. Non-excludability means that I can't prevent you from using it. So like a good example would be like a street light. Me enjoying the street light I can't force you to not have this street light. I can't take that away from you. So some examples of public goods are law enforcement, national events, the rule of law, and then things like clean air and drinking water. Now, the problem with public goods is the free rider problem. And that's when people take advantage of the public goods without paying for them. So if I decide to be a dirtbag and not pay my taxes, and the United States goes to war, the government doesn't go, oh, we're not protecting you because you didn't pay your taxes. National defense covers the entire country regardless of whether or not you bear the cost of the national defense. Any questions so far? One of the problems that comes up a lot in environmental economics is the tragedy of the commons. And this is a problem that occurs when individuals neglect the well-being of society in pursuit of personal gain, which leads to overconsumption and ultimately the depletion of the common resource, which hurts everyone. For the tragedy of commons to occur, a resource must be scarce, rivalrous in consumption, and non-excludable. So a common example of this, the classical example of this, is sheep grazing in a private pasture versus a collective pasture. And on the next slide, I'll talk about that. This can be solved with government regulation or collective action. Give me a second, drink some water. I breathe this mask. Okay, sheep example. Okay, so in the first case, so say you were a sheep farmer and you have a plot of land and you own sheep, And so your land has a carrying capacity, which is the number of sheep that that plot of land can support. And so if you own this land, you know the carrying capacity of your land. And so you won't keep more sheep than your land can support. Because if your land goes bad, then all your sheep die and you're sad. But if you had a common pasture, so say you and your 4 neighbors all share the same land. And so you and your 4 neighbors all share the same land and you all have sheep. Now you're trying to get the most sheep out of that plot of land because you don't care about the carrying capacity. Because if you don't consume the next unit of plot of land for your sheep, your neighbor will, and you're trying to maximize the number of sheep you have. So what happens is you add more sheep and then your neighbors add more sheep, and then you go over the carrying capacity of your land, and all your sheep die because they starve to death, and then everyone is sad. This is, in a nutshell, the tragedy of the commons. So, any questions about that?
It's an interesting theoretical perspective, because it is pretty much theoretical. Because what really happens is that people go and graze as much as they can and then they move on. It's not like the sheep actually die. They just have there's no sustainability. Sort of goes on.
Well, yeah, at least the
Sometimes
inefficiency.
there's
It's not, yeah, they don't actually like it never gets to the point where all the sheep die.
Right, it's diminished return,
Yeah.
and then eventually you can't raise any sheep on that land, so you have to find new land.
Yeah.
Or pause to let the land regenerate.
Yes.
In this example.
But your overall output of sheep and decreases.
Declines.
Yes.
For everyone.
Yes. So tools of environmental economics. Taxes, everyone's favorite. So one way to incentivize companies to not overproduce is to, or incentivize consumers to not overconsume, is to use taxes, because taxes increase the price of a good or service. And so the idea is that price increase makes that good or service less attractive, and then people consume less or they produce less. This theory is built on our supply and demand curves, just like we were looking at for the externalities. And so a classic example of this is pollution taxes, which the US is not great on. I think 13 states have some sort of pollution tax. But like areas in Europe are great on pollution taxes. They have a whole system set up. The flip side of a tax would be a tax credit. And so tax credits are a type of subsidy. And so what they do is they make the services, the goods or services, less expensive, which is supposed to help encourage consumption and production. So one of the common tax credits is the electric vehicle tax credit. So the federal government will give you $7,500 in tax credits if you purchase an electric vehicle. And so what they're trying to do is they're trying to get people to adopt the electric vehicle by making their real price less, to try to boost consumption, because they're trying to get away from internal combustion engine. There's other types of tax credits, but they're used a lot to try to promote green things. So solar panels, sustainable energy, stuff like that.
Electric vehicles, like secondhand from someone, that cost that much, so theoretically I can just get my money back.
Not sure.
Is that tax credit still going on?
Yeah, but so there's a certain number per manufacturer. So I'm pretty sure for 2021, like if you wanted to buy a Tesla, I think there was like 20,000 tax credits available. And so like they've all run out. But if you wanted to buy an electric vehicle next year, that you wanted to buy an electric vehicle from some other manufacturer, you could still take advantage of that.
Does it have to be fully electric?
Yeah, there's actually a table. I can send you the table if you want.
I think the federal one is for electric, not hybrid. If that's
Yes.
what you're asking.
There is a hybrid one. It's less. It's like somewhere in the $6,000 range.
One
And
of the
then-
problems with the credit too is that if you don't actually pay that much in taxes, then you can't prove it all.
Yes.
With credit. Whereas a subsidy would be a little bit different. Actually, get the full amount. Move on.
You have to file taxes on taxes.
What?
Tax credit would be a gift, for example.
No. So like you owe, say, you work this year and you owe $7,500 in tax, but you also bought an electric vehicle, so you just wouldn't pay any tax.
Oh,
But if you own 6,000 in one vehicle, you would only get the 6,000.
Right.
Yeah.
Correct. Unless they do like a schedule where you can actually do it over the course of 2 months.
So this is just the federal tax credit. Also, some states have different tax incentives. Cities even will have tax incentives. And so, yeah.
why don't they advertise it better? I've never heard of it.
Well, I don't think the government really wants to pay you. They just,
It's actually a really good question. Why is it not as commonly known as actually not? I mean, think about that. It's really, it boils down to the media. The government lets people know about what's going on. Accountants would know about it, like tax accountants.
Yeah.
Know about it. Whether or not you would go to an accountant, then you may or may not know about it. If you were looking for an EV, you would find out when you went to the dealership that they would tell you right away. They want to sell it to you.
True.
But beyond that, yeah,
I think you have to be an interest in that kind of area to actually know about those things. Like, there's things in the world that are really, really popular, but unless you're putting your time into that, you're not going to find out about it, if that makes sense.
all right. So there's also emissions trading. This is more specific to like pollution and emissions and whatnot. And it's similar to a pollution tax. So how it works is that a certain number of emissions vouchers are given out to companies in a country typically. And then the companies can trade those vouchers among themselves. They can buy them or sell them to suit their needs. And so there's an overall cap on emissions. And so there's only a certain number of emissions vouchers, but companies can still kind of trade those to suit their needs. So if they're a really big company, they might need more. And so they'll pay the smaller companies for theirs so that they can pollute more without having to, like slash their production. So Tesla, for example, for a while was making money off of carbon credits. That was how they were making money. It wasn't their car sales. It was actually, they were just selling their emissions vouchers to other car companies. Yeah.
you know, another common name for that, there is a common cap and trade.
Yeah.
For carbon, especially, they've done it in the past for different things.
Cap and tree.
Cap and trade. So they put a cap on the emissions and they allow you to trade credits for those emissions. And ideally, the cap is reduced over time so that you're actually lowering emissions.
Yeah,
And
and
there's
this,
companies that are more polluting time to get into compliance and reduce their emissions without hopefully disrupting your operation too much. They obviously have to pay for credits in the market, but it is incentivized.
Yeah, in the 80s and 90s, the US did it for sulfur dioxide, I want to say, to reduce acid rain. The EU currently has a emissions trading system for the whole block for carbon. So they're trying to get their companies to just produce less carbon. So they implement this emissions trading system.
In the west coast of the US, if they were trying to put something together, I don't know if they've been successful or not.
Yeah, I think California and Oregon.
Yeah.
No, California and Washington.
Yeah.
Yeah. Cost benefit analysis. This pops up a lot in the business side of things too. It's a systematic process used to analyze the decisions or used to analyze which decisions to make and which to forego. The benefits of an action minus the cost of the action. That's the little formula you see at the bottom of the picture. That's your net benefits. So if your net benefits is positive, it's a good decision. If your net benefits is negative, it's a bad decision. Now, in order for this to work, you have to have either measurable or estimable financial metrics, such as revenue earned or cost saved. You have to have a number on it. You can't, it has to be quantifiable. Otherwise, you can't capture it in the cost benefit analysis. It also often factors in stuff such as opportunity cost. But because it's highly dependent on numbers, you need to have the accurate determination of the costs and benefits. Otherwise, you're just subject to garbage in, garbage out, and your analysis is useless. And then the final method that we'll talk about is contingent valuation, which is pretty widely used in environmental economics because it often talks about things like, you know, what is the value of clean air and things that aren't easy to put a hard number on. And so it's a survey-based method of determining economic value of a non-market resource. And questions are based on hypothetical scenarios. And then respondents are asked to estimate what they would be willing to pay to sustain, improve, maintain, protect, repair natural and environmental resources. So the proponents of this say that the method is flexible and it accounts for costs that the traditional methods don't. And it also adds critical consumer perspective. Critics argue that the survey responses are not based on individuals' behavioral choices or actual conduct because you're asking them hypothetical questions. And so it leads to hypothetical bias. Because kind of how it goes is that I go, all right, how much would you be willing to pay for the park across your street? And I started a number. And then if you say no, then I reduce the number. I kind of lead you into an answer. So there's maybe some potential bias there. So issues and examples. This is an example of contingent valuation. In 2004, there was a study in Sri Lanka where they asked 300 people about the elephants in the country. So they started out with some background about the elephants, the costs and benefits associated with the elephants, excuse me, and then some possible conservation strategies and how much they would cost. And then they started at a dollar amount. And they said, would you be willing to pay this much? And they said either yes or no. And if it was no, then they lowered it a little bit. You'd be willing to pay this much. And so after they did all that, they found that residents would be willing to pay about $90 million a year. Now, the damage caused by the elephants in the country was about $11 million a year. And so since people would be willing to pay more, it would make sense to pay farmers to not kill the elephants that were damaging their, because the elephants were like coming to eat their crops and stuff. So they determined that it would make sense to not kill the elephants and they could pay the farmers instead. Now, I don't know if the policy ever went into effect, but this is just a contingent valuation. So we talked a little bit about cost benefit analysis. And so in order to do effective cost benefit analysis, you have to price human life, which is controversial because can you put a price on human life, which we're about to talk about. We call this the value of statistical life. The way it's determined is they assess how likely you are to die in the workplace and then how much you'd be willing to pay. And so then they come up with different numbers, and the numbers are different depending on who you ask. According to the Environmental Protection Agency, this value of statistical life is about $10 million today.
That's a person.
That's per person, according to the EPA, though. And I'm about to talk about why that matters. So, and then they use this number and they determine, like, all right, should we reduce pollution, or are we good at the level we're at? And should we mandate seatbelts, or is it too expensive? Which sounds kind of hard, but this is what economists do. So here's some background. These are 3 government agencies that, and this is what they valued, the value of statistical life throughout time. So this one on the right, that's the EPA, and it's about 10 million. The Department of Agriculture's 8.9. The FDA is 9.5. It also depends on the country. So I was looking today, Egypt was like $38,000. How was it? So, so yeah, and these are the numbers that the government uses. Yes.
This is the Egyptian government's figures, not the United States figures, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
This is Egypt's number of their own residents. Yeah, no, I'm not saying that the US doesn't think Egypt is worth anything. What?
Yeah, so that was a good.
Oh, okay. So yeah, now EPA values in 2016 was about 10 million. Now, for comparison, the average lifetime earnings of a college graduate in 2011 was about 2.4 million. If you die and your family sues, the average or the median award is about 2.2 million. For the people who died in 9/11, their families received 1.7 million. The average life insurance policy is about 160,000, and the average net worth of a U.S. household in 2013 was about 80,000. So this is the discussion part. Is the value of a statistical life too low, too high? I'm interested to hear your thoughts. What do you guys think?
Can you bring this up?
This one back?
I'll start. It's obviously too high because that 10 million, that's not meant for a person-to-person conversation. It's meant so the government can do policies to major industries. So, for example, when Ford wanted to advocate against seatbelts, which is what they did, there are a lot of car makers did when they were thinking about mandating seatbelts. They can go, okay, well, when we fine you, we'll fine you based on the government thought of rate of what a human life's worth, and then we'll base your fines around that. So it's in the government's best interest to over inflate the cost of a single human life to increase tax and penalty revenue. But when you compare it to all the others, I mean, it's kind of goofy to say it, but I mean, it's just not worth $10 million.
So how much is it worth, Jake? Tell me.
Well, okay. Life insurance policy, let's go. I would say my prediction, I'm going to say $500,000. That's what I.
$500,000.
Yes.
I would say closer to that 2.4.
2.4 million.
Yeah, like in the military, if you die, they give your family 400,000. But that's if you die under the right circumstances, I guess.
Yes. Well, yeah, you actually do have to meet certain criteria. Your death has to. Oh, you guys laugh, but were you gonna say something?
Yeah, at first I thought that 10 million was kind of low just because of the Tesla suit that happened recently with those racism.
Yeah.
And then he got 130 million. And so I was like, that number, you can't even fathom like how much money it was. So I was shocked at 10 million, but and then I was shocked that the average lifetime earnings was 2.4 million. That's crazy, but like. I think
Crazy
it's
high or crazy low?
Crazy low,
Oh, okay.
because I think that, well, I mean, maybe it includes like people who don't work, but they're like stay-at-home moms or something, even if they graduated from college.
Well, why do you think that's low?
I don't know, maybe more than that.
Well, I think the average wage is like 50 grand, right? The average salary. If you work for 40 years, that's a little, that's like $2 million.
That's depressing.
Yeah. But then shouldn't they like think of it from the perspective of how much value does the person bring to society?
That doesn't count from age 0 to 18. 0 to 20.
Yeah.
That's what's on.
Does anyone think that human life is priceless?
It's really good.
Well, no one really said that.
But no one actually,
No one-
I didn't think of that.
Yeah, I thought someone was gonna say like, you can't put a price on human life.
Oh,
Yeah, I mean, obviously this, I guess the data that we're pulling is, at the very least 6 years old. I mean, according to these, what it's saying.
Yes.
Time, which,
What we're comparing it to, yes.
A lot of these are like derived by technology, market, things like that. So that kind of this obviously changed a lot in the last 6 years, I'd say. So I'm sure these figures could be quite different. But of course, like the question that you said, life being, priceless, that's kind of like going towards empathetic versus these actual figures that they're kind of pulling up. So it's like, what is this EA value really consisting of? This how he stated how it's like too high. Well, I'm sure it's like taking all those actual nominal values and then adding in some of those like.
Yeah, there's an equation for how it's derived. I just didn't share it because.
It just seems like that number is like way too rounded, like it's 10 million. So
Yeah.
it just sounds like they rounded it off, honestly.
Yeah.
Up or down, however they decided to go towards it.
Or like, what if you took all the money in the world and divided it by the number of people in the world? That could work too.
How do you define money?
Take all the, I don't know, look it up.
Based on different definitions, I mean.
Well, okay, wasn't like, 65% of our money printed in the last 2 years or something.
40%.
Also,
There's some-
directed towards the US, correct? Right.
This is just for the US, yes.
So you can't really count.
Like I said, it depends, the value, the statistical value of life depends on what country you're in. Yes,
With this data, does it change with age or is it just like an average? Like,
This is
does
an
it go
average.
up and down depending on.
oh, what are you saying?
What I'm saying is, if you ask the EPA, take your average 10-year-old versus your average 35-year-old, does their value of life change on an individual?
Well, these are all averages, average lifetime earnings.
Right, so, but my question, what would the average age be?
Whatever the average American age is, which is,
I'm sure it's counting for all the ages, so
Late
you're
30s.
just taking the total US population and then averaging that age, whatever they have for their consensus of age ranges.
all right, here's a question for you. Is an old person worth more or less than a young person.
Have you ever seen a bell curve? I imagine it would be shaped like that.
Yeah, I mean, it totally depends on the boundaries that's accounted for.
There's so many variables. It's like that same old person might have spent his entire life in prison. But then what value is
Oh,
there?
so if they're in prison, that their life is worth less? Is that what you said?
But it costs more.
He contributed less to
Than many
society.
people have done.
Yeah. So yeah, expenses in terms of economical output, maybe, if you, but it depends how you define it.
So, yeah, it's all defined on your actual boundaries of inputs. Are you inputting aid as in a decrease over time? So somebody becomes less valuable as they become older because the amount potential they have to put in.
Is human life a depreciable asset?
Is an input somebody who has contributed or the opposite of contributed to society or as an input of those boundaries? I mean, I would assume this value here, this 10 million, has certain boundaries that are placed within this whole, numerical value here.
Plus minus.
I got some sources on how the EPA gets to the 10 million, so I can send them now.
But go back,
Go back here.
see, it like increased so much from 1996.
Yeah.
Well, you gotta remember, we only started caring about, you know what, now I'm not even gonna.
Well, some of this gets back to some other bigger stuff too, because when you look at GDP, for example, which is a really common measure of things, right?
That's, yeah,
But selling weapons or providing healthcare for people who are shot are included in GDP.
yes.
It's just the number goes up, right? But if you're talking about the actual people, instead, obviously, those don't contribute to the quality of life, for example, or, feeling of safety or belonging or, hospital bills. I mean, that costs a lot of money. So when you're talking about court cases and settlements and stuff, it's not just say the person, it's kind of
The medical
what
costs
happens
associated,
afterwards
yeah.
to take care of that.
I also want to be really careful when reading data like this because, this gives the perspective that, the value of life has gone up over time, in America, according to the, what is this?
This is the,
EPA or whatever. But the other thing you have to take into account is during this time to that time, have they changed a lot of their rulings? Have they broadened that boundary ratio, so how skewed is this data based on, or is it very consistent? Because if it's not very consistent over time, you also need to take that into account. Because every time you change like I said, go to the boundary scope. I hope that makes sense, is all those inputs change out the ultimate output. So you gotta be really careful. And that's with always reading data. So to make sure that you're following those same rules, and if they're changing, you gotta understand why they're changing. So you don't get influenced incorrect.
do you wanna say something?
Well, I just thought it was interesting because society, when our parents were growing up, they didn't have seatbelts and they didn't think that it was a bad thing, because they didn't know. And I feel like just as more generations come up, we find more problems and things, so I feel like that's why the value will increase also. Because the scope of things that, I don't know, there's about what you were saying, where you just find more information on that, so I feel like you're oh, I don't know, there's more problems that could occur. You know what I mean?
I found the answer.
You found the answer?
There's $2.1 trillion in circulation in the US.
Oh.
There's 330 million people, so that's $6,300 per person.
There you go. That's not much. Yeah.
All right, not gonna have you make policy that deals with, yeah. You'd be thinking all sorts of, yeah, oh boy. All right,
There are a lot of intangibles too, I think.
yeah,
Because there are a lot of things that are unpaid, for example, there are a lot of, parenting, community service,
Wait,
a
so
lot of different things.
what were you calculating? I put $2.1 trillion divided by 330 million people.
So you're just estimating the life based upon. Our
It's just an idea.
simplifying it.
He's just dollars per capita
Yeah.
would be that.
It's not.
Yeah, I guess it is, that's simple.
Okay, but 2 years ago, before COVID, before we printed all the money, yeah, you'd be worth like 4K.
$4,000,
Yeah.
So it's that number was strictly money in circulation, not having like the value of the stock.
Right, it was only circulation.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. We're gonna move on because we're gonna go over on time. So some other issues that I didn't get the chance to talk about just because of time constraints. Carbon dioxide and climate change, green infrastructure. We got this infrastructure bill making its way through Congress. There's some green provisions in there. That's environmental economics. Access to clean drinking water, air pollution, deaths and illnesses, pricing, biodiversity and biodiversity loss. There are many, many, many other issues. So yeah, thank you for sitting through that. It is now 8 o'clock, so I understand that some of you have to go. We do have a trivia game, it's 15 questions. Yeah, there's a $5 prize associated with it. And then I also have t-shirts for people who went to the meeting last week and who are playing the stock market game. Yeah, well, I mean, if they're not here, I can't give it to them. So, okay. Yeah. So let me. Is there anyone here? Okay.
I'd like to say thanks, that's a good introduction.
Hey, Dr. McGrath.